New enrollment. You've heard of personalized learning plans, which go into effect next fall. You may have heard of proficiency-based learning. Our guest speaker is going to talk about that. There's also proficiency-based graduation requirements and new education quality standards in Vermont. And really what the focus is to get away from seat time, to be thinking about what are kids actually learning, and what is it we want all Vermont children to know and be able to do when they graduate from high school, when they go through our pre-K-12 system. And our guest speaker is going to talk a little bit about that. We have a team working on this. 32 of the SUs in the state, half of the SUs, have a team working with the Agency of Education this year. We applied for a grant, we got the grant, we have a team that's made up of administrators and teachers that are attending 2 days a month, full days a month, getting training on this. And one of the leaders of that is our director of the Cole Hollow Career Center, and he's going to be our guest speaker today, Mr. Nathan DeMeyer.
Good morning. Thanks for coming. Like that, choice. In service. It's in service. We every morning at Cold Hollow, we teachers and students kind of gather around the lobby as we wait for all our students to get there. And yesterday, one of our teachers was talking to some other teachers, and they were talking about in service, and they're like, like in service. They're like, and you know, this is with students. We probably shouldn't be talking about this in front of students, but we were. And they were just saying how, you know, you go and you have to sit there all day. You have to listen to people talk. You have to learn things that you might not be interested in at the time. You're expected to learn stuff that you were taught back in November, and you're supposed to remember it. They don't even feed us good food anymore. I mean, it went on and on and on. That's a biggie. The students started looking at each other like, we do in-service every day. And it could be true. You know, you think about what the kids go through, and they do have to sit and listen, and their food portions are lessened. It's, you know, it's tough. So, I am on this team. Mr. Nichols mentioned that every twice a month we are working on proficiency-based learning, and there's a lot of PBLs, EQS, PBGRs, and I'm going to try to explain all that to you. The goals for today, for me, are just to give you a bunch of information, because I'm going to talk a lot about things that I believe and the things that I think we do at Cold Hollow, and I really think it's the way education should be. So I'm going to kind of plant a lot of seeds, and I'm going to try to challenge your thinking. So one of the things, just so you know who I am, I'm from the area. I used to teach history at this school. Actually, me and Mr. Paquette both taught in this room together. I taught up in that corner. He taught in this corner as the rest of the school was being built. That was interesting. I went to Richford High School, was the assistant principal there for a few years, and now I'm the director of Cold Hollow. So I will make a few plugs for Cold Hollow, because I do believe that's where the best learning takes place, especially for high school kids. And we just have the benefit of kids signing up for classes that they're passionate about, being in a class with others that also want to be there, and we have a lot of time with them. So I think if you have that combination of you're interested, you're passionate about what you're learning about, you really can get a lot out of learning. I believe that as we grow through teaching, we all have a time where we just look at the education system and we're like, something's missing, something's not quite right. So I just want to get a show of hands if people believe or have had this thought. Has there ever been a time in your teaching career, and I know some of you are very young in your teaching career, that you said, this isn't right, I would wish I could just start my own school and do it my way? Has everybody ever had that thought? All right, phew. Good. Because if you didn't, then I didn't know what I was going to talk about. Take a few seconds and think back to that, and actually I'll give you a couple seconds just to talk with your neighbor there and just say, what would you do differently? And so I'll give you 2 minutes and just think about when you thought that, what were the things that you were thinking that you were going to do differently? Thank you very much. All right.
I don't know.
So, the good news, I didn't hear anything that you said, so I'm just going to assume that I heard what I wanted to hear. And the good news is, everything you just talked about is going to be solved proficiency-based learning. Or it could be. It's going to depend on how we do the work. But I do want to say that we are in a very exciting time in education. Is anybody from the state here? AOE people show up today? That's too bad, because they did something right. Finally. Yeah. I think the state finally did something right. They made some laws, they passed some laws that I think is going to change the way we do education. And I think it's a very exciting time for us. What we're going to do today is, like I said, I'm going to provide you a bunch of information about some background about the laws and what's happening, where we are as an SU, and what we have for assets for doing this work, and what the timeline will look like for the implementation of all this. You're not going to expect me to know all this, but we wanted to share it with you first, because we are going to be sharing this information with our school boards next month, and we need to roll it out to the public, because the changes that are coming are pretty significant. And it's exciting changes, it's scary changes, but we know that we're in a time of education where things do need to change. This is the old model of factory work and school work, and that's what schools were made for, to make sure that people were ready for being compliant, being told what to do the work, show up on time, and we value those things. We still do. What the state has recognized is passing isn't enough anymore. We don't know what that means. The state doesn't know what that means. Every single kid gets a diploma, and I'm sure you guys have all had talks with other people about what does a diploma mean? What does that guarantee? What does, just because a kid has a diploma, what are we sure that they are able to do? And I think that's what they've recognized. And we know that things have changed. We go to the next slide. Just because a kid has a diploma, what are we sure that they are able to do? And I think that's what they've recognized. And we know that things have changed. We go to the next slide. I don't know if you've had time to read that, hopefully you did, but again, we're going to share these with you. Jody, we're going to share these with them? Alright, so you guys will have these so you can go back and look at. All these things now have helped change education. Alright? One of the things I want to talk about is how we think about what we know. And it used to be, something goes wrong, we'd call it professional. You know, now we don't. We go to the internet. And the kids do the same thing. If all of a sudden I'm feeling sick or have a cough, I don't go to the doctors. I go to WebMD. Find out what we're on. Something goes wrong in my house. Well, my wife does this, but I don't think. She goes on and figures out what can she do to fix it. And all this do-it-yourself. And we just go to the internet as soon as we have a problem. And we go there to solve it. And the stuff that's on the internet is amazing. I have a student I'm teaching history to. And we posed a question about Pearl Harbor. And after she did all this research, she's got me convinced that FDR knew about Pearl Harbor, knew it was an attack. Talked about all these warnings about admirals letting them know that's going to happen, all the things that led up to this. And that's scary because, you know, we didn't think about that. There's all this stuff on the internet, like, is this true? Is this not true? What do we believe? And we have to teach students how to analyze and be critical thinkers about this kind of stuff. She's like, not only is there all this evidence that I found, and Admiral saying that he told FDR, and FDR's wife said he was even calm that day because he knew it was going to happen. That way he could declare war. He had all these reasons. She's like, common sense. She's like, here's the map. We knew that we angered them. Where do you think they were going to attack? That makes sense. So I figured, I was like, now I really just need to find out. And I was like, Mr. Tepp, you voted for FDR? What do you think? So we are at this time where the internet has changed everything. All right. One of the things I worry about, you know, I'll tell you a quick little story. Can I go over a little bit? Want to tell some jokes? So when I was teaching, I'm going to tell a little story. Some of you may have heard this story before. When I was teaching up there, I caught a kid cheating. And I said, Steve, you know, I caught you cheating. I have to give you a 0 on this project. And he's like, well, how did you catch me? I'm like, well, you know, you copied off Sarah. And he's like, how do you know? I'm like, well, the first question I asked you was, who was the President of the United States, first President? And she wrote down George Washington, and you wrote down George Washington. And He's like, that doesn't prove anything. And I'm like, well, the next question was, who was the author of the Declaration of Independence? And she wrote down Thomas Jefferson, and you wrote down Thomas Jefferson. And he's like, still no proof. And I was like, well, the next one is where I think I got you. And he's like, well, how do you know that? And he's like, well, I said, who wrote the Constitution? She wrote down, I don't know. You wrote down, me neither. That's not a true story. What I'm trying to prove there is, when I taught history, if you had a good memory, you could pass my class. You didn't have to, you just had to tell me what I wanted you to know. I asked you questions that I already knew the answer to, and I just expected you to match my answer. And I'm not sure if that's where we are. I think students now want to be asked questions that no one knows the answer to, and everybody can work together. But, you know, I worry about the fact that, you know, that last slide, that this is my biggest fear, right? Like, my biggest fear about my memory is that my battery is going to go dead. Because everything that I want is right here. If I need to remember something, I take a picture of it, I write it down, I set reminders, and I have a photographic memory that I carry around in my pocket, and all the students do too. And so, you know, if I talk about this being a kind of a bad lesson, if this was a good lesson, I would just send you this, and you could have done it for homework, right? And then had questions when you came in. One of the things that we have to think about is grades. And this proficiency-based learning is going to change the way we do grades. We don't know what this means. We know that Nick is a C student, a C-minus student. We don't know if that's because he was a jerk and knows a lot of stuff, or if he was a really hard worker and just didn't really know all this stuff. You know, because both of those could get you to this grade depending on what your grading system looks like. Proficiency-based learning could look like, hey, I want Nick to know these things. Where is he? Now, I am biased because I have never taught in elementary school, and so a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about probably is geared towards high school. So I want to make sure that I don't leave you guys out, because you guys are very important. Because, as you know, if kids come to us and they don't know stuff, we're going to blame you. We are going to be able to start to design an experience where we know what kids want to know, what we want them to know, and we'll have evidence of where they are, and we know when they can pass through, moved up, whatever you want to call it. We'll know what they know and what they need to continue to work on.